Hello and welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today. For our free wire tutorial today here on YouTube, I'd like to share with you my Paw Prints design. Now this is based on an original suite of jewellery I created about 4 or 5 years ago, and I've updated it to be as simple as possible for those beginning their wire work journey. Here's one of the pieces that I've made, which is attached to a ring. What I'm going to show for you today is the basic shape and form that you can work with, and I'm also going to show you a couple of different applications for the design. So this is the ring I've just showed you, and for this piece I used a jewellery puffy coin bead, so that's a flat but round drilled bead. I'm creating this design with drilled beads in mind, but I'm showing you with both flat beads and with round beads, so you can see the difference in how they look. For the round beads to work, they do tend to need to be on the smaller side. They could be 8mm, perhaps 10mm, maybe 6mm, something in the region for that size for the round ones. The puffy disc bead here is between 10 and 12mm, I imagine. So the jewellery is the blue that I'm showing you here, and I've also got some blue goldstone, which is a man-made material. It looks very, very beautiful in this design, very sparkly, like the night sky. So you could turn it into a ring. You could turn it into a pair of earrings. You could size it up very much so with something perhaps a little bit more glamorous. Now these are hexagonal, but the overall form is round, and they would look really beautiful as a pendant. They're slightly larger. And the demonstration piece I have for you here is a beautiful selection of beads with just one of those disc beads as the focal. So the wire that I've chosen to work with today is 1mm or 18 gauge. And I have here around about 8 inches. Now that's far more than we actually need, but it's nice to be able to work with a larger size of wire just to ensure that you have plenty to work with. This is a round copper core wire. This is quite a firm temper that I'm showing you with today. It's artistic wire. And I'm just going to grab a hold of one end of that approximately 7 to 8 inch length, and I'm just going to smooth that through between thumb and forefinger. What we're doing here is just getting a lovely warmth and fluidity to the material. The next thing I'm going to do is just to make sure that my start point is cut flush. I'm going to just get rid of that very, very end bit. You don't need a huge array of tools to create this design. For today I'll be working with my flush cutters, bent chain nose, round pliers, and also my bail making pliers. You don't have to have bail makers, but they are a useful addition. So I'm going to start off reasonably close to the end of the wire, but just a little bit further down my round nose pliers than I normally would. And what I'm going to do is just twist that around. It doesn't have to be in one movement. I'm just going to create my first circular form. But rather than continuing as if we were making a spiral or a coil, I'm going to stop just here. And what we're going to do is to continue on making a couple of little toe beans. Now for my little design that I'm working with, I've gone for 4 toe beans and a big pad in the centre. You can make it aesthetically however you want it to. You could make it to reflect a particular animal if you like. So I'm just putting a tiny bit of curvature in the wire just here. And I'm going to grab a bead to work with. So I have this random purple, looks like a fire agate of some description. And I'm just going to start by sizing that up so I can get an idea of how the final project is going to look. So I'm just going to leave that up at the top. You see that just there? And I'm going to come back in now with my round nose pliers. So I'm going to leave them approximately the same distance down as we started. And I'm just going to start twisting that around in small movements. Very, very fluid because we warmed the wire. I'm just opening and closing quite gently. What I want to do is to keep the point where the wire crosses over at the base as close as it possibly can be, so that you get a smooth and singular base line. Another thing that I'm going to do every time I make a new toe bean is I'm going to just twist the preceding one over so that they sit snugly side by side. I don't want to crush the wire where it crosses over. So again, I'm just going to put a little bit of curvature in the design, check my bead's going to fit nicely, pop the bead back out of the way, and then create those last 2 toe beans. So a little bit you could, if you wanted to make your life a little bit easier, is to put just a little mark on your pliers with a permanent marker. And I'm just going to eyeball that, I think, today. Small movements, gentle open and closing, and trying to keep in mind that the toe beans don't have to be exactly the same size as they go around, but it is quite nice if they're reasonably similar. So as I've got my 3 to begin with, I am just going to start to add a little bit more curvature to allow it to sit over the bead. In for the last toe bean, I'm going to move that around. Now, one of the pitfalls that you can create with this design is too much gap or too small a toe bean. So I've made this one too far away and too small to show you how to undo that. So you can very, very carefully grip with your round to nose pliers to open that out, and then you can make that toe bean slightly larger. If you need to move it closer to the preceding toe bean, we're just going to roll the whole thing around until the outer circular form touches the preceding one, and then you can just close that up as you need to. So these are not all the same size. You could take a little bit longer if you wanted to get them more equal. I'm just going to grip down where the wires cross over at the base and try and get those to sit on a slightly more rotating around fashion. So I'm gripping the base of each of those toe beans and just creating a more circular form. On this last one, I do want that to continue on, so the tail of the wire is coming away as if it's in a straight line before I grip a hold of that, and then I can start bringing a circular form around. Now what you'll notice, because we warmed the wire, even though this is one of the firmer wires to work with, we were able to make a really nice smooth swoosh. If you struggle to make that shape, let me just warm this and open it back out to the previous step. If that is a struggle for you, you can either use the very, very end of your ring mandrel to just form that around, or you could, and make sure the ring mandrel doesn't roll off the desk, you could use the largest size on your bail making pliers and just roll that around slightly to get that circular form. However, if you do warm the wire, you should be able to quite simply grip a hold of it at the point just beyond the last toe bean and allow that to swoop around. So I'm going to do 1 pass of wire to begin with and bring the tail of the wire along just inside where those toe bean lines are. I need to pop the bead in to make sure it's going to fit. So that's a little bit too large actually for what we need. What tends to happen is I make them a little bit too small. So we need to make this slightly smaller. So I'm just going to take that wire and gently coerce it into a slightly smaller circular form, bringing the tail of the wire all the way around until it at least comes to that first toe bean that we made. So I'm going to pop the bead into position. That's going to fit and spin around and look actually quite lovely. So what I like to do, if I'm making a charm, the bead's quite excited to see you there, sorry about that. If I'm going to make a charm, I will actually go for 2 passes of wire around the paw pad section of the design. So I'm just going to push that little section of toe bean so that it sits up against that first pass around. If I flip the design over and pinch very, very firmly, again, because we warmed that wire, what we can do is trace our line, the first line that we made, until the tail of the wire comes back to that very first toe bean we made. Now that's where I'm choosing to trim my wire away. So I'm going to cut it just here, look twice, cut once, and then hopefully you won't have to cry about anything. So that is in essence the paw print design. For the next part of the demonstration, I'd like to show 2 different ways in which we can set a bead inside the centre, the little pad of our paw print. So to begin with, I'm going to show you how to set a round bead in the centre of our little paw print. What we need to be aware of is that we're going to start on the round section in the centre. I'm going to cast onto one of the edges here, and it needs to be as far away from the cut end as possible. So if my cut end is here on the left, I'm going to chase the wire around all the way, not just once but twice, until we're going to start over here on the right. And what I want to do is to wind around there where we're at little toe bean number 4. So if I flip the design up to the edge, what I'm going to do is wind around the single section of that side So I've just poked the wire up in between those two circular forms, draw the tail around, and if I just stretch the toe bean segment away slightly, I can reform this in a moment, you'll be able to see exactly where it is I'm winding on. So I'm going to wind on around about 6 times, I would say, just at toe bean number 4, where the wire starts to create that circular form. And if you do open the toe bean section away, that's 1. Then it gives you an opportunity just to chase the wire through a little bit more easily. So that's only 3 times we've got so far, so there's a 4th time. You can draw that up in the gap, like so, to get a 5th time. And then that last one, we might just have to arch that down just a little bit, take the tail all the way through, and then you may have to post that up in between the toe bean section and the round section. So I've got 6 good wraps around that core wire there, and I'm just going to make that as neat as possible, as I possibly can. Trim the end away like so, put that rubbish in the bin to be recycled and melted down, and just smooth that very end bit down so that it sits as close to that central form as we can possibly get it. Once you've cast your wire on securely, we're just going to scooch the wire slightly up so that it sits just inside, and then pop the toe bean line down across the top of that paw print. We're then going to draw the wire over the top like so, and we're going to add in our bead, which has just disappeared from my field of vision because the camera's in the way. So I'm going to slide that beautiful purple fire agate into position. And if I show you the other side, again, we're very, very far away from the cut end. We're going to cast our wire around just at the top here, where the toe bean started off, but we're at least 1 full circle away from the cut end. So again, what you can do is make your life slightly easier by just opening that second pass of wire out. Just make sure that you're winding around the piece that is far away from the cut end. So I'm going to just support that bead loosely to begin with, push the wire up inside that paw pad, and just draw that tightly into position. So once you get the wire smoothly through, you can give that a little bit of a pull if you need to, making sure you're not unwinding from the far end. Now I'm going to ask my editing man to just get as close as he possibly can to show you where we're going with the wire. So we're taking that all the way around for a 2nd time, keeping that as tight as you possibly can. So I would like to do that the same number of times on both sides, just because of an aesthetic value. It just looks a little bit neater and a little bit like you've thought about it, but obviously that's a little bit dull, so feel free to fast forward the next couple of seconds while I just catch up with those 6 little wraps. So that's 5, draw the tail of wire all the way round, 1 last time into position, and that's 6. And what I'm going to do here is take the tail of wire over the top, cut just a tiny portion past the end there, and that gives me the opportunity to take that tail of wire and tuck it down inside so that it sits away from anywhere it can catch, and then we're just going to close that wire up on the back there, so we've set our bead inside that paw print. So let me show you one of the slightly neater ones that I made earlier. You could make this into an earring or a charm or whatever you fancy, really. So for 2 alternatives, I've set this with 0.4mm or 26 gauge wire. In my examples, I've used a very small bar of, I think this looks a little bit like 20 gauge. So that's 0.8mm wire, and I've just taken that through the centre of the bead and folded the ends over. So there's 2 options with how you can set the bead into position. This is slightly stronger, but you might not like the bits that stick out. With the finer gauge wire, you need to up the amount of coils you make around that paw print shape. And again, you need to keep it away from the cut end so that that sits as neatly as possible. Now what you can do if you want to is weave around those 2 bits that go around the central pad on your paw and just hold them together, but I wouldn't do that at the same time as you're setting the bead. Another way that you can do this is to use a puffy coin bead and a slightly heavier wire which has gone astray. Here it is. So I've got an offcut over here of 24 gauge, which is approximately equivalent to 0.5mm. It's just slightly stronger. And I just wanted to show you what it would look like if you used one of those hexagonal faceted puffy beads. So I'm just going to pop the wire through the centre and just allow that to sit in position. So again, you'd see that you'd need to avoid the cut end. So for this one, what I would do is just open the cut end out, slide the wire down between those two passes that form the main pad of the paw. I'm going to flip that upside down, and then we can simply run the wire 5 or 6 times around up towards the toe beans. I actually think that's going to look quite nice with those. I might make a second one. Got a pair of those, that will make a lovely pair of earrings. Well, thanks for hanging out with me making paw prints. There's just a couple of ideas for you there. You can add them to rings, turn them into wall art by sizing them up. You could even, if you wanted to, make a whole bunch of them and put them on a stretchy bracelet. I think that would be quite cute too. Well, have yourselves a beautiful day, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye for now.